My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and we make zero trust for critical infrastructure, manufacturing, water, for secure remote access. And today we're going to talk about VPN alternatives for those specific environments, and specifically how to talk to the problem of using my HMI from anywhere. Multi-factor, secure, simple, but you can't go and change how those things work. So how do we make that go? Let's talk. The agenda today, we're going to talk about the remote needs of critical infrastructure. They're somewhat different than your traditional IT desktop, laptop productivity app, and talk a little bit about why, some of the applications involved. We're going to talk about the gold standard of how people do it today, which is a VPN with a shared password that each of your vendors have. You know who you are. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of that, and some of the notable risks. And we'll talk about VPN alternatives. So VPN alternatives, namely, I'm going to talk about zero trust as a model, how to make it actually simpler for the end user and more secure for the operator, and meet the compliance requirements of multi-factor and so on without any changes to the world. Make your HMI work from anywhere for anyone. The first thing, I was going to do this as a poll. At the beginning of this year, CISA suddenly dropped 3 emergency VPN directives, thou shalt not, 3 different vendors. Since then, there's been more. Just yesterday, we had a really critical issue come out for Palo Alto. But I don't think anyone saw this coming at the beginning of the year. And in a nutshell, the agencies that were regulated by them, they had nearly zero time to make infrastructural changes. And it's caused people to sit and think about the ideas of blast radius and what the VPN has access to and how trusted it is, and different people had different responses. Some said those don't apply to me. What emergency directive? I don't really care. Some are like, oh my God, let's just go unplug everything and hope. Others told their remote staff, okay, suddenly this is no longer a privilege to do your job remotely. You got to get in here. Others started to pretend it didn't exist. We've never run E1. We don't have cellular backdoors in our network. We just don't talk about it. But what I hope people did is they signed up for my webinar, which has a solution. How can we make it very easy for end users to securely get their job done without getting in the way, without having this issue of suddenly there's a device that has access to everything that's been breached. And breached it has been. These are just a few headlines. So, in the bottom right, that's the CVE for the Palo Alto from yesterday. They found out about this because it was already being exploited. It wasn't some researcher who found something very complicated and reported it to Palo Alto with 6 months of time. It's anybody that has access to the web UI has instantaneous access to everything. And let's talk a little bit about that. You've got a next-gen firewall. What is a next-gen firewall? Well, it's a thing that does man-in-the-middle, actor-in-the-middle decryption. And that means that your outbound traffic goes through an inspecting TLS agent, just like your inbound one does. And what does that mean? Well, any traffic that has ever gone from your site to the world has been inspected by this thing. And that's your Azure, your Amazon, your Google, your cloud infrastructure. It's your HR, Bamboo. It's some employee that's checked their bank information. It's all of your credentials this thing has available to it. All of the credentials for all of the users for all of the time. You've taken this device, you put a root certificate on, you've injected it into your devices, and now somebody else in the world has had access to it for some period of time. And now you're starting to think, oh my God, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to change all my credentials for all my services? Yes, it does. But it's worse because some of those, they could have gone into your Azure and they could have added a service account. They could have modified other people's credentials. They get really, really a long rabbit hole once you start putting these infinitely trusted devices in your network. When this happens, I'm not saying this is a bad company. They're one of the best ones out there. I'm not saying they wasted time finding this. I'm sure they got on it as quick as they could. But when you have something that's in a position of infinite trust, 100% trust, and that trust is breached, it's impossible to get away from that. And that is not just an inbound issue, it's also an outbound issue. It's not just it's found broken on Tuesday and we fixed it on Wednesday. It means how long did they have access to what, and do they continue to have access afterwards on account of having the credentials? In the next one up, the Colonial Pipeline hack, That was sort of the Katrina event of cybersecurity. Some people call it the Pearl Harbor event, but you had a gasoline pipeline that has something crazy like 630 million gallons, I guess, billion liters a day of gasoline flowing through it. And they had various partners that had connectivity to their infrastructure, and they had a VPN with a shared password, and some people had access to it, and one of them accidentally injected malware, and boom, it's down. It's the kind of thing wars start over. In the upper right, we talked about the Texas water facility. This one's Muleshoe, Texas. They overflowed a water system. The one on the bottom left, this is a hack that occurred on HMI infrastructure, and they were able to replace it's an OIT HMI combination. They were able to replace the firmware on it and hack it for geopolitical reasons. But the key is every one of these happened because there was a fully trusted VPN style infrastructure that they were able to guess a password to. And that's what we're here to talk today about, it fixing that, but securely, but simply. So the needs. Well, it's easy to say all these operational technology people, they're just not doing a good job. They're lazy. They don't understand. The realities are different. You buy a PLC, you're going to run it for 20 something years. You buy an HMI and you spend a lot of money, you get it integrated in panels that are custom built for you and bent to shape and all that stuff. You're not going to be upgrading that thing every 3 years like you do somebody's laptop. This has a long lifespan. It's not something you patch every patch Tuesday with Microsoft. Typically, they remain unpatched for their entire life because they need to stay in service. And there's a lot more stuff. We're talking about a water plant today as my primary thesis, but any industrial control system, it sort of tapers outwards. You got the primary process, manufacturing this or PLC that, but then you got the things around it, the HVAC for the building management system, facilities, smart door locks, security cameras, and they start interconnecting to those networks. They're not necessarily on the SCADA network, but they are adjacent to it, and maybe they have Wi-Fi, and maybe that's a way you can exfiltrate data from it. Your HMI, your PLC, your ERP system is another example. It's kind of a crossover IT, OT thing. You're putting your inventory in it. You're checking stuff in and out of manufacturing. These things have a long lifespan. They can't be patched frequently. They can't be patched often. The hardware has a long life, and there may not be any upgrades available to it. And some of them have, by design, negligible security. Most HMIs you don't log into and sign with a multi-factor and this and that. You walk up and it's there. It's like a thermostat in your house. They also have a lot more constituents. In an IT environment, it's my laptop and I'm the only user of it. But here you've got different companies that are involved, different areas of control. You've got the integrator that put together a bunch of things and did the programming for it initially. You've got the manufacturer of that product, the OEM, that may want some access for maintenance. You may not be able to maintain it unless they can see it. Some things aren't in calibration unless they have access. You've got a contractor that's working sort of as an employee for you, but also sort of not as an employee. You might be a joint venture. There's two of you work together. One of my customers, there's a water treatment plant that's jointly run by two adjacent areas, but they share the inflow to it. You've got your own staff. Sometimes there's regulatory input needs. You've got a reporting system that your water metrics are available in. Every one of these groups has different scope, risk, and controls. They have legitimate needs to use the infrastructure, and they have their own identity providers, their own companies, and it would make no sense for you to say, Siemens has access to my network. That makes no sense. 200,000 people work for Siemens. So you cannot possibly think that that is secure. One of them was fired 2 minutes ago for something terrible. You need to start thinking about individual users. And you don't want to create shadow accounts. Well, I'll just create a shadow, me-them account, because then when they leave and you don't clean it up, what you need is single sign-on with their identity provider, with their authentication, but then you need to control the scope of what they can do. That's called authorization. So the VPN was traditionally how you did this. You said, well, you need access to my network. What does that mean? I don't know, but let's just give you a long Ethernet cable to everything and stay out of the bad stuff. We trust you, right? So is that good? Well, it's pretty good for people who literally need access to everything, and that's probably 1 or 2 people on your team, the IT staff. They need access to everything. Maybe the VPN's right for them. But the VPN is really an all or nothing, on or off solution. Going back to my earlier example, say if Siemens has VPN access to you, that means 200,000 people have access to everything. one bit of malware, one bad USB key, one phishing link, it doesn't even need to be people that are malicious. They are in and bad stuff's happened. The VPN evolved from this dial-up concept, predating SaaS and cloud. The idea was I connect to my company when I'm traveling from a hotel, and it predates the idea I was connected to multiple things like SaaS. It was also evolved very much around the singular company principle. I work for my company, command and control. They dictate what I'm allowed to do, my acceptable use policy, and all users are alike. None of those things are true anymore. Industrial facilities have been getting more and more complicated. There's more and more knowledge of the processes needed and the individual components. The HMI programmer is not different than the PLC programmer, etc. The good part about the VPN though is it just works. It's like being there. No additional steps. I can just leave it running forever. Transport seems to be encrypted, so it can't be sniffed from a coffee shop. They trust the vendor, and nobody thinks they ever got fired for deploying a VPN. I bet you people no longer work for the Colonial Pipeline partner that the VPN access. I'm just don't have any inside knowledge on it. Just a guess. They may not work there anymore. The bad, particularly when you're talking about the lens of you are the operator and they are your partners. What would they say? What would your integrator say or the manufacturer? Well, they support a lot of people like you, and you're all different, and they don't like that. You can't install your software on my machine. I'm not going to let you. So just because you use VPN vendor A version B installation method C, I got 100 customers. I cannot possibly do that. What am I going to do? Uninstall each one, install a new one every time I need to support somebody? The other thing you might say, and this is a routing issue, my video calls break when the VPN is up. That's because all your traffic routes into the facility and back out again. You do a team call with 100 people on it. Now you got 100 people using the upstream of the company, and you never really thought of that. They say, I can't print from home. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's because the VPN takes down the local networking. But then some of these other soft ones that they might say, look, I use a tablet. Something's gone wrong. There's an alarm. I'm going to pull over my truck to the side of the road and open my tablet with my LTE modem, with 5G modem. I guess I should modernize. And oh, you've got a VPN client. It doesn't work for my tablet. I can't do my job. My subnets overlap. This is a common complaint, but it's sort of very technical, so it's sort of below the surface. I support 100 different companies, and they each use overlapping IP space, and I use the overlapping IP space, RFC 1918 private, which means I sometimes have to resubnet my machine in order to connect to a new customer, and I'm kind of grumpy about that. People at the end, they just share accounts. Like they just say, let's just share an account on the VPN, everybody's fine, and let's not use multi-factor because that would break our sharing. The ugly part about it, you're connecting their risk to your risk, their network to your network. It isn't so much about do you trust that person, do you trust that person, their PC, everything they've ever touched. Remember when you were in first year university and they did that thing, shake hands with the person on the right and left, and they were either saying half of them will be gone or teaching you about STDs? This is what the VPN's like. Everybody's touched everybody inappropriately. Their ransomware is your ransomware. You don't want that. At the beginning of this year, CISA came out with these announcements on VPNs. That one's bad, that one's bad, that one's bad. It can access everything. There's no fine-grained audit. Who knows who's been up for how long? The good news is we don't need to panic. There's a solution, and it's simple. So the first thing is, if you were to interview the end users and say, what would you describe as nirvana? They're task-based workers. Again, there's a person pulling over the side of the road, pulling out a tablet, accessing an HMI, looking at an alarm, deciding what to do. The first thing they would say is, look, the rest I don't want to be involved in. I just want this to be simple and easy because I want to get in and out of that task as quick as possible. I want to access the resource I need and only that. I don't want to know about anything else. I just get my job done. From where I am, look, I'm not going to go somewhere else. You think that you're going to put IP-based rules on and how the VPN can connect, and therefore I'm going to have to go into my office to remote to your office? I'm at home. I'm in a coffee shop. And look, this is how my life's going to be. I'm not changing. On the device of my choice, look, I know you want to give me a company-issued laptop, but I work with 30 companies. I can't have 30 laptops rolling around the back of my truck. This is the one I got. I'm going to use it. And I'm going to use my identity, my single sign-on credentials. Look, I work for company A. I sign in as Don at A. You work for company B. You sign in as Jane at B. Let's just keep that. That way, I don't have to remember another password. One of the examples I used to use a lot is the average person has 110 passwords, and there's 88 words in Wonderwall by Oasis, you know, the one that's going through your head now. What's the story, Morning Glory? Do you think you could memorize an entire song? No, of course, people are going to reuse their passwords. Those task-based workers, what I need from where I am, with what I have, with my identity, make it happen and make it secure. That's it. Any user, any application, any device, any network. That's what Zero Trust is. So Zero Trust, it sounds really complicated, and there's been a lot written about it, and you know the standards this, and you know everybody and their dog has attached it to their thing. You know, now my yo-yo with Zero Trust, but really it's a very simple concept. And there's 3 swim lanes. The first is identity. Who are you? If I know who you are and it's an individual person, not a company, that's what we need here. So it's not the Siemens account, it's Jane at Siemens. The second, and just I need to figure out that you are who you say you are and prove that, and that's called authentication. So you hear sometimes authentication, it's proving who you are. Who you are is who you are. It's intrinsic. You should not have 2 accounts. You should have only one. Your account has nothing to do with permissions. That's authorization. That's what you're allowed to do. If I have an individual user and a who, and I can control what they do, that's what we're looking to achieve here. I'm the operator of the plant. That person is allowed to have read-only access to this thing at this time. That's the authorization. And the last is how. How do I get you there? So that thing isn't on the public internet. How can I make it available so that they don't have to have a VPN installed? If you have who, what, and how solved on a per resource person basis, you have Zero Trust. If instead it's who to an entire building, that's a VPN. If it's all of the stuff is available to everybody, then you have chaos. Who, what, and how, make it per person, per resource, pairwise, and you have Zero Trust. Now, what does the end user view look like? Well, it's relatively simple. As an end user, none of that matters. You just treat all of your applications as if they were public websites. I know they're not. I know that the HMI is VNC based, and I know that you use Rockwell Studio to do this, and PLCs aren't web-based. But just pretend everything was on the public internet, and you signed into it just like you would sign into your Office 365. It's like that. That's what they see. They open the browser of their choice. They sign as their user, optionally challenged for multi-factor. They see an array of little icons that are all their stuff. They don't see stuff that they don't have access to. They click on it, and it opens, and it does its thing, and there is no networking changes, there's no IP changes, etc. And it works on the existing device and everything. It's their existing login. They log in as user at partner, not vendor-name or anything like that. You as the operator control what they need to do. You control what they're allowed to do. You control whether they need multi-factor, etc. And this is ideal for narrow task-based workers. As an integrator, I log in and check some PLC tags and sometimes reprogram firmware. As a user of the HMI, when there's an alarm, I log in and check and see what to do about it. As somebody who manages the facilities, there was a breach last night. I need to check the NVR and check the video camera recording. There's no layer 3 routes. There's no VPN. There's no software to install. That's what it is. And the nice thing about that is it's secure for me and simpler for all. It's non-zero sum. Everybody wins. The operator, this is more secure. The end user, this is more simple. Both parties win. Where normally we see security as zero sum, made it more secure, made it less easy to use. That's not the case. Here on the right, the 2 videos, they showed 2 different users signing in. One signed in with their Azure sign-in, one signed in with Google. And it's the same sign-in experience, the same HTML, the same, all that stuff they would see for all their other corporate apps, which makes it really easy for phishing prevention. The end user is easier trained. They recognize, they're comfortable, rather than everything's got a different sign experience. It's easy to phish that person because I log into 110 things. There's 110 different URLs, 110 different screens. No way. There's no user provisioning and deprovisioning. There's no HR hookup. That partner of yours, you work with Siemens and they fired that person, they take them out of their identity system like that. Now they can't access your system. You don't have to worry about, oh, I got stale accounts, because there's only one account and it's managed by the company that manages the person. There's a request and acknowledge flow so that the user trying to do something can say, may I have permission? It goes to the administrator, yes. That allows you to do something like put the safety pin in or stop the machine or whatever. It's just a lot simpler. And it even works in a, I use the word air gap a bit in quotes because a true air gap is an air gap, but in most air gap environments today, there's something that's going back and forth across it, and it allows you to do multi-factor even in there where there isn't internet access inside it. So it's really important to do that. I'm going to show a really brief demo. Yes, I've pre-recorded it. I did that just so that I stay on track, but it's only about 15 or 20 seconds long. Here's the user signing in. Here we're a Google G Suite shops or a Google Workplace, so I've signed in there. I'm providing my multi-factor. We can do code-based, you can do push-based, WebAuthn, YubiKey, all those other things. So there was a biometric-based one. My phone chirped off screen. Now I have an array of icons. I could click on one of them and open Rockwell Studio, big fat Windows 32 client. I could open my HMI just like I did there. You can go to remote desktop-based things. Sometimes there's web-based. This is VT-SCADA, thin client. You're able to log in, snoop around, clear your alarm, that sort of thing. Okay, I lied. It's about a minute long, the demo. Here we're going to go to VNC-based, maybe an HMI directly, or maybe a desktop of a machine. But you get the idea. It's really simple for the end user. Everything looks like it's browser-based for the sign-in experience, but it also can be integrated to the start menu. They can go to the start menu and do all these things just like they always have. There's no change in their workflow. You're not changing your network. You're not re-architecting. It's all proxy-based. There's no change in their workflow. The applications work the same way. It's really easy to go direct. Here it's showing bringing up a fat client off screen. We'll bring it on. There's the remote desktop. So that was the idea for the demo. Now we move on. So why does this reduce risk? So coming back to VPN alternatives, I'm pitching a reverse proxy, identity-aware firewall, zero trust solution, Agillicus NEX. And I'm saying this solves the problem of multiple identities because single sign-on. This solves the problem of the VPN having too much access because it's per thing. This solves the problem of not having an audit trail because there's an audit trail. Every single action is done. This solves the problem of not having multi-factor on that ancient HMI. Of course there is. This solves the problem. All of those problems are solved. This reduces your risk. You have no more shared accounts. Shared accounts is your biggest risk. You look at the MITRE reports on successful attacks on critical infrastructure. Valid credentials is the #1 category. This means it's not somebody coming in through some complex zero-day vulnerability in something. They're just walking up and either guessing a password or finding it from somewhere else and then walking in, and they're doing what's called lateral reversal. They're in, they go sideways into something else, and away they're gone. And if they get in and they get to that Palo Alto device with yesterday's flaw, you're dead. So those shared accounts are gone. You don't have to worry about keeping track of all your vendors, all the people that work for them, and whether they still work there. Like that quarterly review of that, that's a long time, a quarter. Overbroad access is done. I use the word blast radius a lot. When something bad happens, how far can it get? In my Palo Alto example earlier, the next-gen firewall, if they get in and get that, the blast radius is infinite. It's everything your company has ever done with any account in any system anywhere in the world, including SaaS providers that are external. It's terrible. With this model, you know exactly. So if the user left their device signed in on the bus, then they had access to that one resource. They didn't have access to anything else, but they had access to that one resource. So now you can go to the audit trail and see that's your blast radius, defense in depth. So you got an audit trail. You can enforce multi-factor. Multi-factor is something, as an operator, when you roll that out to your partners, they grumble a lot because they're thinking, how do I share this? Look, I got a team of 10 people support you. We got a shared account for my company. What am I going to do? Put a YubiKey on a hook on the wall and have them, can you please do an SMS? I can do an SMS reflector. Thanks. I'll just share it with everybody. You don't want that. Multi-factor is personal. Share it with the same number of people you'd share your toothbrush, like one. That's it. Removing the VPN, the user can only see the thing that they're allowed to see. There's no shared software, no licenses. It's way simpler. A lot of people are thinking Zero Trust is a complicated implementation. This is going to be something we work on for the next year and a half. It's not. You can be up and live in an hour because it's a proxy-based architecture. You don't change the configuration of the resources. You don't change the behavior of the users. It's just a little web interface, click, click, click. This user, this permission. Okay, this is my resource. And away you go. You roll it out to one team or one resource initially, depending on how you go. You get very, very simple unified authentication. Those end users see the same sign-in experience they're already used to. There's no training. They sign in with their existing credentials, with their existing org, with multi-factor, with Microsoft or Google or Okta, whatever they need to do. There's no configuration. You don't have to go and configure your Google or your Microsoft or your Okta. Just click and it's enabled. With precise authorization, it's not Don has access to everything in my plant. Please stay in the good areas. It's Don has access read-only to HMI3 at 4 p.m. and you know who Don is, and you know who that thing is, and it's very fine-grained. There's permission, trust but verify. And then it's very, very seamless access. As an end user, it doesn't matter. I could use a Chromebook, I can use an Android, I can use iOS, I can use Linux, I can use Windows, I can use Mac OS. You might be able to even use a smart TV. It just works with every device. You don't have to worry about resubnetting or changing your IPs or breaking your video conferencing. It just works, and it's simple for everybody involved. So, my call to arms. There's a growing underserved demographic here, the digitally disenfranchised. They're being told they got to drive and look, the employees all have remote access, but you don't. So let's fix them. The second is industrial is getting more complicated. You're getting multiple disciplines. Commissioning is becoming a cast of thousands rather than one person with a screwdriver. You got the HMI expert and so on. Get them all onto your site as needed remotely. It lowers your costs. It improves your mean time to repair, fixes your lateral traversal. Understand the VPN is not an appropriate solution for all. I'm not saying it's not right for your IT team. It is absolutely not right for the people that support your water plant, for your manufacturing plant, anything critical infrastructure. They don't want to install it. You don't want them to install it. You don't want to be the next Colonial Pipeline. That lateral traversal risk, it's not worth it because you've got an alternative that's simpler and cheaper. And understand that single sign-on and multi-factor is for everybody. It's not just for your team. A lot of people are guilty of this. Let's make my team efficient and screw them. Don't need to. Make it very simple. So with that, feel free to type any questions in the chat. I would love to interact with you after this. Feel free to send me an email, don@agilicus.com. Come to our website, put an entry in the calendar, fill in a form, look at some of our case studies. Drew from my team has posted 2 case studies. The one for the city of Midland, Texas is very water specific, very mid-sized city with a complicated wastewater treatment infrastructure, big industrial process control, a lot of people supporting them. This is an enabler. The person that is the plant manager can now control who has access when, rather than having to open a trouble ticket and go through IT, just a lot simpler. And then the second one he's pasted there is around remote operations and asset management. So this is for anybody who manages services on behalf of their customers. You could move from being a simple system integrator, panel shop, etc., selling on time and materials, to a value-based ongoing service. And we're a great partner to work with in this area. So with that, I would love for you to engage with us. Check out our webinar series, and thank you very much. Again, my name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus. We make really great zero trust available for critical infrastructure and secure remote access. Bye-bye.